Hey, Marina.
Hello,
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it hasn't been a long time this time, which is always great because I felt like there were a couple months between the previous time I had been on a live stream with you, but now it's just been a month, which is great. We should keep it up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can do live streams any day of the week.
Okay, I'll schedule some time. And hello everyone who is in the live right now and on the chat. Um, Welcome to this live stream. Just as a quick reminder, we have a code of conduct here, so let's all be nice to each other. And yes, please keep using the chats to talk to us, to share your opinions, your stories, ask questions. We'll do our best to answer all of them. So yes, Peter, before I do a recap from our previous episode, our kickoff episode, let's say, do you have anything you want to share, or should I jump to the recap?
Um, yes, I do. Look at this.
What is that? That is so cool.
Yeah, so can you guess what it is? I'll sit straight for a moment.
That is code, commit, deploy, and repeat.
Yep, it is. So my t-shirt arrived early yesterday, I think, and I think yours might still be in the post.
Okay, good. So for the next one, I'll have a t-shirt that is as cool as Peter's because right now it's just a blank t-shirt, so I'm not that cool. Cool. Yeah, thanks for showing that. So let's do a quick recap from what we did in after hours. And
Yeah, let's do it.
yeah, if anyone here doesn't know what after hours is, it's another live stream that Peter does with Noe, which is very cool. I've been to a couple episodes, and on the December episode, we did this thing where we talked about this app we want to build together called Make It So. And we did some experiments with Stitch to build a cool, like kind of old school UI. And then we asked Antigravity to no, first we asked Gemini to generate a PRD for us. And then with that PRD, we asked Antigravity to generate a web version of that app, which was also nice and very quick to do. But now we want to build mobile versions because I'm historically an Android developer and Peter is an Apple developer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the recap. So now what are the steps that we need to do so we can build this app like in a real world scenario? We'd still need that PRD, which we
Mm-hmm.
should like build now for real, not only for experimentation. We need to agree on the data model that we're going to use for that. So it's the basics to store the data. And then we need to start coding, which today I guess we'll start with iOS.
Yep, that's my suggestion. Yeah, iOS today, and then next time maybe we can do Android, depending on how far we get today.
Cool. Nice. So do you still happen to have access to those cool designs that we created on
I
Stitch?
do. So let's bring up the screen here.
Yeah.
So this is what we talked about last time, right? So and if anybody wonders why this design looks so very fancy, we decided we wanted to have a brutalist design.
Yeah, that is true. I remember that. I think it was Noise idea.
Yeah, and yeah, it looks very, very special. I'll say that. So I think for this time around, what I want to achieve is something that looks much more at home on the platform, right? So I want this to essentially look like any other reminder app or any other to-do list application that you might see on your iOS device or on an Android device, right?
Which
So
this that you said, it already opens up a whole conversation about like being very platform specific, because I also can see that on a like native Android experience these days, like a modern one. But I'm curious to see if the design that you have in mind for iOS will be close to what I have in mind as an Android developer. So that will be interesting.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we can spin this multiple ways, right? So we need some sort of PRD, which is a product requirement document, so that we know what we want to build, and then some sort of, we can either create a screen design or just try to wing it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, what do you think? Should we try to create a design, or should we? I mean, so you've played around with Stitch a little bit more than I have. So
Yeah.
do you think that it would benefit from having a PRD?
Stitch,
Mm-hmm.
do you mean? I don't think so from my experience. I mean, I'm not a pro in Stitch, but I did use it for a few things. And I felt like given more specific, like designing one screen per time and being very specific on what you want on one screen or even one feature at a time works better on Stitch. So a full PRD, I don't think it would be that effective. I think a PRD is more when you have the functionality, and Stitch is more focused on what the vibe and the UI should be like. So if we're using Stitch again, I would either try one of these things, either select one of the screens and say, can you create a modern minimalist iOS UI version of this?
Mm-hmm.
Or even start a new Stitch project from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
or just go with your instinct since you've been developing for Apple for a long time. But
yeah, so I think what I would want to do is maybe let's start with a PRD and then just throw it into a coding agent and see where it takes us, right? So maybe we can do that. So let's think about what do we want. So we want to build a productivity app, right? So that is the first thing. So which other features?
we want to be able to create to-do lists.
We want to be able to create to-do lists.
Add new items, delete items, and update these items.
So the user needs to be able to add new items to a list and also tick them off and edit them and delete them if they decided they don't want to do it at all.
And we want to store this on Firestore.
Data storage should happen in Cloud Firestore, and this is going to be a Firebase project.
So you've said the basics of what we know we want on this app. Of course, we could go more like detailed now and think about future iterations like security and authentication, but maybe we should start with this and see where it takes us. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we can start with this, but I think what we haven't yet decided is the fields that we need, right? So let's see. We need the status of the item. We need a title. We need a priority.
Maybe a due date, so people know, like we can show them in the UI differently if the due date to complete that item is approaching.
Yeah, and also a due date. So can you please create a PRD for me? So let's see what we get. Also, can you still hear me at the same level I was talking before I started using the Super Whisper tool? Because I hear you a lot softer now.
Oh, really? No, you sound the same for me. I don't know, people in the chat, in the live stream, does Peter sound okay to you all?
Yeah, I think it's it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just the tool probably reducing the output on my AirPods. Let's see if I can increase that for me. Okay, so what's happening here? Oh, it's because the window is so large.
Sure, yeah.
Let me increase that. Okay, so here's our product requirements document. Firebase Taskmaster. Well, we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we did have another name for it, didn't we?
Yeah.
The goal is to build a lightweight, responsive productivity application that allows users to manage their daily tasks. It will utilize Firebase, and the focus is to create, read, update, and delete functionality for task items. And then we've got our user stories for creating, reading, updating, and deleting. We've got priorities, scheduling. We've got the technical architecture. Okay. So it starts with the collection structure. So
Yeah.
it says everything will be in the users collection, and then we'll have a user ID and then the tasks. So how do you feel about that?
That's exactly, as you were saying that, I was thinking. Because immediately, the data model that comes to my mind, and I don't know if that is just because I'm biased from working on similar apps before, is having one collection tasks and then having a field in each one of the tasks, which is the owner ID that we can pull from Firebase authentication.
Mm.
And I think thinking long term, if a task in the future can be shared or have more admins or like can be shared among other users, I think we're closer to that model by having one collection tasks and then finding another way to define the owners than having it as a sub collection of each owner. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So basically, instead of having this, hello, can I copy that? So instead of this, we would like tasks, and then it's probably in the way that it wrote it, task ID.
Yeah.
And then inside the task document, use the user ID to determine who this task belongs to. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one change. Let's see the other things. So we've got the ID, but so we don't need an ID field because we'll use the document ID.
Yes, which is automatically generated with Firestore, which is weird because it's saying in the description that it is the unique document ID generated by Firebase, but that is the name of the document itself. We don't.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe it's referring to the Swift data structure, right? So, but I'll add a note to that. I don't think we need the field on the document as we'll be using the document ID. So title is completed. Priority.
It's yeah, okay, string that we can convert to enum on the client platforms, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, we could also use an integer, and then the higher the integer, the higher the priority, and we could map that. But using a string has the benefit of being a speaking value, right? So if you look into the database, you'll see high or low or whatever. So that that might be the benefit of doing it this way.
Yeah, because usually we have like P0, like 0 and 1 as the most urgent things, but there may be people who perceive it differently. Like the higher the number, the higher the priority. So if we have only numbers, we risk people being confused if they look at the database, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then due date and created at. Yeah, this is good. So main dashboard, the list, displays a list of task cards. Each card shows the title and priority, a checkbox for the completion status. Completed items should be visually struck or moved to the completed tab. Editing, and it's using a task modal for adding new stuff. Yeah, that's a good idea. And then non-functional requirements, offline capability. We get that for free with Firestore.
Yeah.
Real-time updates as well. And then good thing, it talks about security rules. We'll definitely want to make sure that this is secure. Okay, so, and it says the data structure allows us to easily add features later, such as categories or projects, without breaking the existing database. I don't think that's wrong, but I believe that our data structure allows for that as well.
Yeah, like, I don't know how to phrase exactly what came to mind. Like, they are right in the sense that, yes, it allows us to do that, but other structures will as well. Do you think we should think about it a little bit more before we commit to this data structure? Like, for example, they said projects, which I personally, I would call it lists, like different lists that you can have, not necessarily project, because this sounds very like work focused, and I picture this app being any list that the user wants to create, even if it's just a groceries list. What would you do, Peter, if you wanted to grow this app to not be only one general list in the dashboard, and instead you have a list of lists, and then as you tap into one of them, that's when you see the to-do items?
Yeah, so I think I would have another collection for managing all of the lists, and then each item would also have a field that contains the list ID. And then I could easily say, well, give me all of the items that belong to a specific list if I want to display that list. But I could as well say, give me all of the users' items.
Yep.
Yeah.
Read my mind.
So there was one other thing that I wanted to add into our list of changes here. So display a list of cards. So we want this app to use the platform specific metaphors, and it should look at home both on iOS and Android. So while might be a nice idea for later, when we might want to add Kanban boards. For now, let's just use a plain list, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll couple of changes, please. So let's see what it comes up with now. And so, Marina, I'm curious. When you create PRDs, what do you typically do? So I find that people use very different approaches. So for example, I'm a person who makes use of Gemini, the chat application, a lot. And that is why, it was, for me, it was like the go-to point to go and do that, because it's it feels like more approachable, right? I can basically just I have an idea and I can go into the browser and just start doing it, and I can go on my phone and do that. But there are other ways to do that as well. So what about you? What's your preferred way to ideate?
So right now, after AI, I do the same as you. I use Gemini to describe the project that I want, describe the general idea, a list of features, the platform that I'm building it, and any technologies that I'm sure I'm going to use. For example, here we knew iOS and Firebase, and then I let Gemini do its magic. But before AI, I had different templates that I would use, and curious enough, it would follow the same pattern as when I talk to Gemini, right? So you open the document, and the first thing you do is, okay, I need to have a general idea of what I want to build. And then from there, you're like, what features do I need to accomplish that idea? And then you break down the features, and you're like, what tools and frameworks and languages will allow me to accomplish these features an easy way? So it's basically the same. You follow the same ideation, but in one you describe all the details yourself, and on the other one you just send a rough outline to Gemini and let it work on the specifics.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes I end up developing or trying to develop the PRD in Antigravity, but I find that Antigravity is, it has this idea of an implementation plan, and we'll see that later on. And I have the impression that the implementation plan is much more feature focused, right? It is much more, oh, let me build out the idea for this specific feature here. And it seems to me that if you're trying to build something that is larger, like an entire application, and you try to work with Antigravity to give you the implementation plan for that, it's, it doesn't feel like as complete as you get here, because this here literally says it's a PRD, and a PRD is more than just an implementation plan, right? It has all those additional non-functional requirements, for example.
Yeah, I feel like Gemini is better because it's not that action-driven focused. It's not like, okay, I'll take this and I'll give you a list of things that you need to do. No, it is more focused on describing the project, which is exactly what we expect from a PRD.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it made a bunch of updates. So for example, it updated our data structure and said we're going to store this in the tasks collection. And then it updated the data schema for us. So that is, and it made a note about the document ID. That's great. And at the very beginning, oh, and then platform metaphors, standard white rows with separators, swipe to delete functionality, chevron icons on iOS. How does the Android part look for you?
Slightly more padding. That's interesting. I don't get the slightly more padding, if I'm being honest, but okay. Material design repo effects on tap. Yes, that is expected.
You know what I think it's referring to? I think this is, to me at least, I'm not, I'm not a daily Android user, but every time I use an Android app, it feels like it's more airy, right? It's not as dense, but maybe I might be wrong.
I know what you're saying, because I once had the same feeling, but I think we are getting the platforms are getting much closer as time evolves. Like the whole idea of modernizing UI is making them look more and more similar over time. So, well, it may be a thing of knowledge cut on the model, maybe. But right now, the latest I've seen from Material, I don't see much more padding than an iOS screen, that being that I'm a user on both platforms. Not enough to make it to the PRD. So that's interesting. But let's leave it as it is, I think. Yeah, I would like to ask Gemini why more padding. I think that would be a fun. Let's use a different name though. Yeah, we could so. The build up is amazing.
Okay, I'm trying to get 2 answers in one go.
Let's see.
Okay, let's see. So unless there is anything egregiously wrong with that one, I think I would want to take that and then go and see what we can implement with that.
Yeah, okay.
Make It So is an excellent name. I'm glad. It has a great ring of command to it. Regarding your question about Android padding, so
Design system.
oh, look at that.
Standard list items often have slightly more vertical height. You see, that's great actually, because it picked up that is very like slightly, to a point where a human eye that is not very attentive to design might not pick it up, but I like that it did. So let's leave it like this.
Yeah. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom to see. Usually there is like a button to share, right? Let's see if it comes back if I reduce the size. Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Copy response. And then, OK, let's do Antigravity, right?
Yeah.
OK, so I need to first click around on my screen. OK. So folks on the stream, the name of this show is program, right? So code, commit, deploy, repeat. We will push this to a GitHub repository either at the very end of the show or shortly after. And it's going to be the Firebase video samples repository for now until our good friend and esteemed colleague Morgan helps us to set up a new repository where this can live properly and so that we can use all those other goodies that GitHub projects give us. But for now, it's going to live in there. So what I did before, I cloned the repository. And let's see. So apparently, oh yeah, so I created an empty folder in there called ccdr. And then let's create a new one, make it so. Here we go. So, and then I'll open Antigravity. And it's opening on my other monitor. And here we go. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'll name it prd.md, because hopefully this is going to be an MD file. It seems like it is. So, and then we'll have to remove some of that. So that was just additional chatting, and the would you like me to do anything else? We also don't need. OK. Cool. So there is one thing that I want to get at, and that is if you use Gemini or Antigravity or Gemini CLI without anything, so basically plain vanilla, you get a good experience, but the experience is better if you have better tooling. And better tooling at the moment means installing additional skills that teach the agent about the coding platform or the environment. So we can try to build this without any skills and then see how it does, and then maybe add skills and see if it does better, or we can install them right from the beginning. Any preferences? or we can do it as we go along.
Yeah, let's see what it will come up with this only.
Okay, so I want to build a to-do list application, and I've got a PRD here sitting in my project folder. So add PRD. Please review this and let me know what you think. No coding yet. Even though I've got planning mode turned on, I often find that it's overly eager to go into the coding.
Yeah, I think there hasn't been one time where I used Antigravity with the planning mode that it didn't jump into asking for permission to perform some task.
Yeah, I mean, you can configure that, right? So you can, where is that?
You mean the mode? As in, like, you don't have to grant permission? Yeah. But I do like to see what are the things it's coming up with, because I do like that it creates a whole implementation plan and you can see step by step. But I also like to see doing step by step. There has been times where I just left it running and did something else, but usually I focus on what it's doing and try to learn from it.
Yeah. So at the moment, we're using Gemini 3 Pro High, and it's doing well. Earlier today, I tried building something, and it was going really, really slow, and I had to switch to Gemini 3 Flash. But for now, we can stick with 3 Pro.
Yeah.
So also, let's see if I can make this slightly larger.
Bigger. Yeah. It is better now.
So based on the PRD, you have a solid foundation for an MVP, well-defined focus. And then I have a few observations and questions to clarify your requirements. So user ID. Should we implement anonymous auth? Should we?
Yeah.
We should. And then starting with, well, it gives a recommendation even.
Try to be starting with anonymous auth of a permanent account. It's often a great UX. I wonder if it learned it from our own video saying that, because you and I did a couple of videos talking about that. It is indeed a very good experience.
Yeah. So technology stack and native look. What technology do you intend to use? Web, PWA, Flutter, React Native? No, we're going to go full native, right?
Full native, yeah.
And then I want to, so it needs to know the stack. Due date and notifications. Should the app trigger local notifications when a task is due? I mean, that seems like a very convenient feature, but also like something that is not part of an MVP.
Yes, our MVP is just being able to create tasks and do crude operations.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a little bit, so I know why it's answering here, but unfortunately you can't comment on individual things. Let's do this. Let's do anonymous auth. This also should be a native app, so we want to use Swift, SwiftUI, and Kotlin and Jetpack Compose on Android. And then what else? Due date. Local notifications sound like something that is not part of an MVP. Yeah, that's good. It makes an assumption. And then edge case. Yeah, we won't mention that, and then we'll just assume that it'll figure it out for us. Okay. Can you please create an implementation plan for this?
There is a question on the chat. Is this KMP project, so Kotlin multi-platform? Is it, Peter?
No, it's not. So this is going to be a full native SwiftUI application. I mean, so a KMP application, I feel the benefit of KMP is when you have stuff that, or lots of shared business logic that you want to reuse, right? So that is my understanding of why KMP might be beneficial.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, a to-doist application is mostly CRUD. There is not much business logic in there.
Yeah, I think it's too simple to kick off an effort to use KMP.
Yeah. So it's going to create two separate root folders, which is a good idea. Ooh, nice. Yeah, so it's going to be a full-on monorepo. So data layer. It's going to be using Codable. We are going to have a task repository. It's going to use Firestore listeners. No combine, please. Let's use modern Swift.
For people in the live stream that don't know a lot of Combine, can you explain why you're saying that?
Yeah, so Combine is a reactive framework that Apple launched a couple of years ago, and everybody was completely bought into it because that was one of the missing puzzle pieces. And then I think 2 years after they initially announced it at their WWDC Worldwide Developer Conference, 1 year they completely stopped talking about it.
Which is always suspicious.
Yeah, and so the community got very puzzled, and everybody's like, maybe we shouldn't be using it anymore. And so now everybody's using, I mean, some under the hood, I think SwiftUI still uses Combine, but on the surface, we now have the observation framework, which gives you most of what you need in a much more elegant or easy-to-use way. So, and then we've got the UI layer. All of that looks really good to me. Android implementation looks pretty similar. So it's also going to use a repository.
Just trying to... Okay, so you're going to have a repository managing Firestore. It's not following the most up-to-date architecture recommendation for Android apps, though, like when we're talking about nomenclatures. For UI layers, yes. So we have screen, we have the task item, which is probably a composable in a different file. We have the main activity. The only thing that is missing, I think, is that we do have repositories, but they are... Do you remember when you used to have like service and service implementation files, which would make it very easy to maintain in the future and switch the implementation? And yeah, someone said MVVM. Yeah, mother of your mother would be the architecture recommended for Android. But the names here is what I'm like talking about, because now the most recent is having a repository, and this repository can pull from different data sources. And then if that data source changes in the future, let's say we go from Firestore to, I don't know, a real-time database, then we just change the data source file that the repository is pulling information from. So, and I don't understand what the collection reference is supposed to be, because it just says flow and suspend functions, but it's not even marked as a KT file. So I'm a bit confused on what that is supposed to be.
So I think this is just a continuation of the first line. So all of that is just one single line.
Firestore, okay. Now it makes sense. I missed the lack of the bullet point on its side. Now it makes sense. So yes, can you add a comment asking if we can have a remote data source file that does the actual communication with Firestore, and the repository just fetches, just pulls information from that?
So like this?
Yeah.
And then that
Does the actual
and-
communication with Firestore?
Okay, and then that also reminded me of something that I need to make sure up here. Make sure to use modern Swift with the observation framework. No, combine. Okay, and then since we'll focus on iOS today, I'll tell it to only implement iOS for now, and then we can persist this implementation plan to a file so we can come back to it later.
Yeah.
Automated tests. I will focus on unit tests for the repository logic if time permits. Does it know that we're on a live stream?
I mean, yeah, it's a busy guy, Gemini, you know. Lots of people talking to him at the same time. It's a very busy person.
Yeah. I have taken the user's feedback to heart. I'm now focused on integrating Swift's async await in the observation framework. Yeah, so this is one thing that if you have a skill that teaches the model about modern SwiftUI development, you wouldn't have to do that manually. Instead, it would learn from the skill, right?
Yeah.
So I've updated the plan to use the observation framework, no combine Android, introduce a task, remote data source for better separation of concerns. So let's take a quick look at that.
Repository.
Okay, so it's here and the repository is still there.
Yeah, and it depends on task remote data source and exposes flow suspend functions to the UI. Amazing. That's what we want. Well, it wouldn't be to the UI, it would be to the view model, but I get what it's saying.
Okay. Okay. So I think we can now move into the implementation stage. One thing that is a bit of a problem for coding agents at the moment is that for iOS, there are a couple of files that had, the file format has been invented in the olden days when people still thought that XML was an amazing idea for doing everything. And coding agents and LLMs are horribly bad at maintaining those files. And even if they think they can do it, they do a bad job of doing that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new project using Xcode, and then I'll tell the agent to use that. So let me move this here. Create a new project. It's an iOS app. Make it so. And Marina, what's the package name that we typically use?
com.example.google.firebase, I think. Give me 1 second. I'll get that for you.
But it looks good to me.
Yeah, I think that is the one. I just want to be sure. Good Grado. Oh, it's com.google.firebase.example. So it's just like move the example to the end. But I don't think that will really affect us in anything. But if we want to follow the same as the other repos on the Firebase extended, that would be the path.
Like this, right?
Yes, and then dot the name of the project.
Yeah, it's doing that automatically. So let me find the correct space, ccdr, code. Okay. Oh, and then it wanted to have a new folder for iOS.
Yeah.
So this is just an empty project. And I can now go back to Antigravity and say, I have created a new empty Xcode project for you in the, and then folder. So let's see if that is a trigger for it to start into the implementation.
It is. Did you see the first? I've got the green light is literally the first thing it said.
Yeah. I've switched to execution mode. Well, let's see. And while it's doing that, we can watch on what it does.
Say Sunday.
So, Marina, do you have a list of good jokes that you can tell while we're watching?
Not really. I'm very bad at jokes. I'm bad at Portuguese jokes if you want to hear any, but I was going to suggest something else while Gemini or while Antigravity is doing that. Do you want to go back to Stitch and try to like click on one of the UIs and see if it can come up with a modern minimalist iOS version of that?
Yeah, let's do that. Also, I think what I'm going to do is I'll kill Xcode for a moment because my machine is busy.
Oh, it is.
And I think it's a simulator. Okay, let's go to Stitch. So yeah, how does it work?
If you click in that, click on, yeah, so you see you clicked on that and that immediately went to the input square on the left bottom corner. There's a mosquito flying around me here. Sorry. You see the typing thing on the column. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So let's do that again. So if I select this, oh
yes.
nice, it goes there, and then so can I add multiple?
No. No, I don't think you can. I think it's only one.
I can.
Oh, you can. That is new to me as well.
So and then if I that is so nice. Okay, great. So let's use this one, and then where can I type?
You should be able to type. Something happened when you did like unselected. Can you clear that typing thing?
I might have to reload the whole
window. God. Okay.
Okay, let's try this again.
Yeah. Now you should be able to type.
No, you don't have permission. Oh, that's why. So let's remix this thing. I think that is what it's for, right? Finish creating your remix, open project. So I think a remix basically is a clone of your project,
clone of that belongs to you, and then you can do modifications, which is crazy because I did share this with you, but I think it's just sharing for like visibility and collaboration.
For review. Yeah. So what's your prompt?
Create a modern minimalist UI iOS version of this UI. Sorry, minimalist iOS version of this UI. Like that. Yes. And then you can generate variations. Yeah.
Free Flash. Yeah. So which one should we pick?
So we can do one with the redesign. The redesign uses Nano Banana based on an existing design. So we can try with that. If not, we can run the same prompt again with Free Flash.
Okay. Oh, and it's also going to generate 2 variations.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay,
you can change that if you want.
Oh. Ooh.
Now it's generating
5. No.
Yeah, okay.
I think 2 is enough.
Yeah.
But I can't go lower than that.
If you unselect it, it means yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's generate, and then you have 15 redesign screens remaining today. Have fun. So let's see what it comes up with.
Now, do you have some jokes to tell me while this is generating?
Well, Gemini keeps on telling me this Java joke. Yeah, let's see if I learned it enough. Why don't see? It's you see it 10 times a day and you can't recall it.
You still can't.
Let's see. So why do Java developers use glasses?
Java developers use glasses.
Like glasses like this one.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because they don't see sharp.
Oh my god. That is so good, actually.
I see. I had to, think how the joke actually works. So I wonder is there some sort of, oh, here you go.
Zooming in. Yeah, there you go.
I've got this very fancy mouse. And it has a button that you can press, and then if you move the mouse, it will zoom in and out, and that is so good. I just found this out yesterday as I was working on some Keynote slides. It was so useful because when doing Keynote slides, I always want to go into and see the details.
Yeah.
So here's our screen. So why did it put it here?
I think he just wasn't very good in understanding where it should be placed.
Yeah. Okay. It doesn't look very iOS-y to me, though.
It doesn't look very iOS-y. You are right.
So let's move this up here and give this one more try. And I think in the background, Antigravity has finished its job.
Okay.
So let's. Oh, okay. So I'll try a prompt.
Okay.
I need a version of this screen that follows the Apple Human Interface guideline to look native on iOS.
Instead of, oh, okay, never mind. I was going to tell you to change to Gemini 3 Flash instead of Nano Banana, but
yeah, but
it
now
should
we
be
have the same prompt, the same model, but a different prompt.
Yeah, but the thing I think is that the redesign feature, I think it's meant to do exactly that. So you can see that nothing changed on the element itself. You still have a tag and you have cards and you have 2 tabs and a date. So it just redesigned like the shape, the feeling of this, but it didn't change anything on the UI. And I think if you run with Gemini 3 Flash, it will just have its own like creativity. It will be free to reorganize this screen on whatever shape it believes it's the most native UI experience for iOS. That's what I believe. Don't quote me on that. But from previous experience doing Redesign and Gemini, this is what I felt like.
Yeah. Did you see that those screens jumped to the right? So it did make space for the new screen, but apparently, so for some reason, it just puts it on top of the other screen.
It's crazy. So someone in the chat said that they have designed an app using Firebase, GenKit, and Next.js within 3 days. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Can you?
Great stuff.
Yeah. Can you put on the chat what kind of application this is, if you can share?
Yeah, and if it's if there is a link, you can also share it.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here.
It is thinking it's
really
adjusting spacing at the same right now.
Oh, here we go.
You see?
Yeah.
Also, what is up with the 2 titles?
Yeah. They're really important.
Yeah.
I mean, so it did remove the fab because it thinks that is not very Apple-like, which is funny because Apple has started using fabs themselves, right? So if you go into the Reminders app, it does have a fab for adding new items. So yeah, it feels like we would probably have to work a lot more on the prompt to make sure that we get something that looks platform native. And I wonder, well, so what we can do is I'll use the same prompt, but I'm going to use a different model.
Yeah.
And while it's working on that, we can go back to Antigravity.
Yes.
So,
and while
Tree
you
Flash?
True Flash, yeah. While you are regenerating that, so the person said that the developer, I don't know how to read this name on YouTube, so I'm sorry. I don't want to mispronounce your name, but they have deployed and summarized it is deployed and summarizes release notes and daily updates from Git. That sounds useful, very helpful to just start your morning, just see a summary, don't have to change many
It
tabs.
does sound very useful.
Yeah.
I think
Thanks for
I
sharing.
would love to use something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So
RD. Okay, cool. Sorry, the person just said their name. It's RD. Am I saying this correctly? I hope so. Cool.
So we have our implementation. I'm making. Okay, so it even refactored the starting view, and is code complete pending the Google service info.plist file. And what about dependencies, right? So we need to add Firebase Firestore and Firebase auth to your Xcode packages and the configuration file. It's like, I noticed only the iOS folder exists. Well, mate, you implemented yourself. So what I'm going to do first, we need the Firebase project. I forgot the name of the package by now. So what we need to do, and this is, so by the way, I'm now showing some of the friction, and hopefully we'll be able to remove some of that friction in a moment. But the problem right now is I can't run this application from within Antigravity because Antigravity doesn't have support for Xcode or for Xcode projects, right? So if I try to say run, this wouldn't work. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to go into my Finder and then to find the project and open it. And then it opens in Xcode, I hope.
Yeah. This is the same that I'm doing for Android projects with Antigravity. I just switched to Android Studio.
Yeah. So, but I'm going to show you something that makes this a lot better in a moment. So first of all, I need to copy this this bundle identifier, and then I can go into the Firebase console and create a new Firebase project, and I'll name it make it so live ccdr 01. We want Google Analytics because maybe later on we might be able to make good use of that.
Yep.
So,
did Stitch finish?
Good point. Still busy.
Wow, the design has been generated for you. Would you like any changes or?
But wait,
can you reload?
Am I in the correct? Yes, I am, right?
Do you see the other two above? Isn't that the screen?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, that's what I was gonna look for. Oh, did I go into the? I think I went into. No, what happened?
What happened? I think you were correct. If you zoom in, it's just hidden behind. Like if you zoom in and then you move the one, not this one, the one below it, this one.
Oh,
yeah, that's the one. So do you see like how it had more freedom to create tabs at the bottom and another different like session? It just creates more stuff.
Yeah, I think it's better, but
Mhm.
it doesn't follow liquid design, liquid glass,
Yeah.
for example, right? So it's even now. So it's it still gives very strong Android vibe. Well, I'm saying Android vibes, but it gives very strong non-iOS vibes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, but you are correct. That bottom tab gives a lot of Android vibes.
Yeah, and then I mean, in the past, iOS also looked a lot like that, but now with liquid glass, it looks a lot different. And also, I think this top bar would also look different. And yeah, I mean, like it looks very much like Stitch has a strong web DNA, and it looks like something that you would design for the web. So
Yeah.
I think maybe Stitch needs to learn platform metaphors a lot more.
Yeah. Before we move that, I know I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but can you go to the homepage of Stitch? Just like open stitchwithgoogle.com. So if you start you see, if you can start a new app or web, and I think we created the other one that you cloned for web. That might be the problem, but we can explore that next time, because I'm going to try to do the Android version of that.
Yeah, let's do it next time. So our project is ready, and now we can add our app. By the way, anybody for whom this is too fast, we've got many videos about setting up Firebase for your project. So do go to the Firebase channel. Well, you are on the Firebase channel already. But watch our videos, and then you'll be able to learn how to do this properly and not just in a rush. So I'm going to drag this over and just let it drop into. So this is really nice. So if you move around, you'll see that you can drop it into any of those folders. But if you move it here, it highlights this entire group, which is where I want it to go. And now it sits right here in this folder. And now the only other thing that we'll have to do is add the dependencies. So next step, I can copy the bundle name, the package name, add a package. And no, it needs to clone the repository.
While it's cloning, Ricardo Lima said in the chat, fiz todo o meu projeto em Firebase e Studio, ficou incrível, and this is Portuguese, and this means they made the whole project in Firebase and Studio, and it is incredible.
Nice. Did you bring your crew, Marina?
I did, yes. Everyone in Brazil, basically. All 24 people in Brazil are watching.
Nice. So what do we need? We need auth and Firestore. And then it will resolve all the dependencies. And then we want to run this on a simulator. Let's see what happens. So either it'll work perfectly, and then I'll again have my mind blown, or there will be compile errors, and then it's a question of how much time we'll have to spend to fix this.
Yeah.
Also, apparently, all of this consumes lots of CPU.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so janky.
Yeah, I was gonna say that before you ended your simulator, you were a little bit like frozen at times, and it has gone completely, but now you just did it again.
Yeah. Oh, so the person speaking Brazil, or is it another person?
Ricardo Lima is speaking Portuguese. Not sure if Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese.
Yeah. It's so small on my screen, it was hard to read the username, but I think the person from India is not the person speaking Portuguese, right?
No. The person from India is RD, and is the other person that said they created and deployed the Git project, to summarize Git.
Nice. So Xcode is saying that it's launching the app.
Yeah.
And that means at least it compiles. Let's see.
Serious. We need to have like some sort of music that we can play in this time, which is like,
yeah, or confetti.
Mysterious, yeah.
So this is normal. Launching iOS apps takes quite a bit of time. I don't know why. Even if you're not live streaming and completely consuming your CPU by doing all of the things at the same time. It used to be a lot faster in the past. OK, so we've got our task UI. Let's see if I can add something. Do the very first CCTR live stream. That is high priority at the moment. OK. Check if the app actually works. Medium. And then check the database. OK, so oh, nice. So it moves the completed things to the bottom, which is quite useful. I mean, like it sounds like such a nice idea. The user experience is a little bit surprising. So the first time I did it, I was like, whoa, what's going on? The sort order has changed.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'm not sure about this experience, because now we only see 3 items. So we could see that it went to the bottom. But as the list grows, think if we had like 20 items and then I click on the first one and it just disappears from the screen. Because I don't know that unless we scroll all the way to the bottom as we do this move, which I believe is what would happen. But I don't know. I think as the list grows, this animation after crossing may be a bit tricky. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
So it seemed to work, but it actually didn't, because it says the database does not exist for the project. And then it gives me a URL that I should visit. So that's very nice, but I'm already there. And then let's create the database. Yeah. So Standard Edition versus Enterprise Edition. Marina.
Me.
Why do we have 2 different editions?
So we have some other features on the Enterprise Edition that we don't have on Standard. For example, we have MongoDB compatibility in Enterprise, and we have pipeline queries, which we just launched. And I believe we're going to have an after hours about that soon. So
we will.
People stay tuned to learn more about pipelines. And yes, it just gives you your Firestore queries a lot of new capabilities. But for this app, for this MVP, I think all the features on Standard should be enough. So
yep,
proceed with that.
So database ID default, we're going to leave the database in the default location. That's all right. And then we'll start in test mode. And let's provision the database. So I think that probably the next thing that will happen if so here's our database. So if I add a new item, let's try that. We should be able to see that in the background. Set up the database. All right, it's not showing up. Maybe just a matter of a simple refresh. Nope.
I do have a guess.
Mm-hmm.
We need. Oh, OK. Okay, so that is the rules. We seem to not have permission to do that. It may be because we're not authenticated, because we didn't enable anonymous authentication on the auth.
That is a very good point, because I mean the rules are wide open at the moment, right? So it basically just says, well, anybody can create unless the as long as the date is earlier than March 27th. Sorry, February 22nd, 27th. But it might actually be the case that let's see. So it doesn't filter on the user.
There goes my theory.
But let's. So I'm going to run the application again. So maybe that will help. Because at the moment it doesn't seem like we're using. Oh well, there is Firebase auth.
Yeah.
There you go. Listen for query, add, blah, 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 failed. The query requires an index. You can create it here. So we are going to copy this URL, and then I will create this index. Save. And now it's building. So that takes a moment. Fortunately enough, we don't have much data in the database, so it should be quick.
Yep. Peter, does Firestore support full text search in enterprise? We just got that question.
I think that's definitely on the list.
Sorry, go ahead.
It hasn't launched yet, right?
No.
No, but
not yet. Yeah. But we hear you. We hear all of you.
We know it's important for everybody.
Yeah.
So, and I think people will be pleased. Well, we're still building the index.
While it's building the index, we have one more message on the chat, which is Ricardo. Oh, wait, we have two. Let's go with Ricardo first. That is in Portuguese, but I'm going to translate to everyone.
I'm so glad that you're here, Marina.
Right? So how nice is that? Ricardo was in my event, the Firebase in Google, the Firebase event in Google São Paulo. And that's when he did a switch on his career. So.
Oh, wow. That is amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Well
Very
done.
happy to hear. Thanks for sharing.
Well done.
Ricardo. And the second comment that we got is about full text search again, saying that is a must-have feature.
Yep. It is a very important feature. I agree. So let's see if there's. Okay. Composite index has been enabled. Let's run the application again. Here we go. So, and let me bring up the data browser in the background. And then we'll be able to see what happens if I add a new item. Create an index. Ta-da! There we go.
There you go. Cool.
Very nice. So,
what happens if you,
Yeah, what?
Yeah, that's exactly what you were going to do. I was going to say, nice.
And also, what I actually was going to do was to show it the other way around. So I'll change it here. And then once I hit update, it should change in the app. Bam!
There you go.
I mean, I've seen this so many times.
Never gets old, does it?
It never gets old. It's so good. It's
I
literally one of the best features of Firestore. I mean, there are so many good features and great features, but this is, I mean, if you've ever tried to implement something like that yourself and you had to manually code the data synchronization logic, you know how much work it is to get this right, or to get this in place in the first place. And for this to just work right out of the box, that is why I am so in love with this feature.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, this is really great. So I mean, I think we spent about 1 hour and 20 minutes now, and I know that we need to end the stream in a couple of minutes because we need to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
But I'll say that we've probably talked a lot more than Antigravity actually took to build this application for us. And might I just say, we didn't have a single compile error.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we had much more like talking and like playing around with Stitch, creating new designs, and talking about how we used to do PRDs before AI. So it's more, I think we could safely say we would have gotten to the same result in half the time, but I did enjoy spending double the time talking to you and everyone in the chat. So
yeah. So there's one thing that I want to show that makes the whole experience of using Antigravity for iOS development a lot better, and that is this tool called FlowDeck. And what it does is two things. So the first thing is, let me close all of this. So I'm now back in Antigravity, and FlowDeck has a plugin for VS Code-based IDEs, and it is here. And when you go there, it asks you, hey, can you select an Xcode project? And you can either say, well, let's open a folder, or there should be, let's see. We can try that. So open a folder. Let's open this one. And then, oh, wait, I was too quick. Select Xcode Workspace. So now it detects our project here, and then the scheme inside there. And now I can actually run this from inside Antigravity, and I can even press Command R, which is the shortcut that you would use in Xcode to run and build your application, to build and run your application. And now it wants to know where I want to run this, and I can filter. So for example, iPhone 17 Pro. I can even select which version. So I want to run on iOS 26.2. It's now building the application, and at any moment, the simulator should come to the foreground, and the application will run in the simulator. And I can even debug the application. And I just noticed that my video feed is very slow. This is already a fast machine, so I don't know what else I should do. Oh, it didn't work. What happened? No problems? I don't know. So, interesting. So it did have compile errors here. Let's give this one more try. Maybe it has to do with the project setup, because I did. Yeah.
It has 8 errors now. If you click on, oh,
yeah,
it's weird that you click on view issues and it doesn't show problems.
Let me try one thing here. Okay. Let me open this again and give this one more try. Build and run. So I've successfully used this on much more complicated apps than this. So it does work. Yeah. So I don't know what's the problem right now. But integrating stuff, that's always the hardest part of everything. Yeah, so it doesn't work. But maybe let's see if this part works, because it also has an interactive mode, which runs on the command line.
That is nice.
On your terminal.
Yeah.
And so the very first thing that you'll have to do is select your project. It's detecting the scheme, and now it's detecting the targets. And maybe we have better luck here. So 17 Pro debug release setup complete. And now you can press H to get help. And then you've got shortcuts to build, clean, run, stop, or run the test, and even see the logs. So let's try building first. And if this doesn't work, then I'll shut up for now. Yeah.
While it's running, we've done a lot of coding and thinking today. So the next step is commit, I believe.
Yeah. So at least commit locally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some issue that I have no idea how to resolve. Okay. Anyways, so let's go back into Antigravity. Yep. HEY dot, and then I'll show you my favorite thing about Antigravity.
Wow.
And that is, so first of all, we can go back to this thing here into our session, and then I can say, can you please write a commit for me and push this back into the repository? And my most favorite feature is, let's say you've done lots of tiny little things, right? And then you might want to have a more fine-grained log of what you did, right? So for example, you implemented a feature, and while you implemented the feature, you also worked on the CI/CD setup or whatever. And everything is now in your workspace. And you're like, oh, I should have isolated all those tiny little things. But you can tell Antigravity or Gemini CLI or any other coding agent to atomically collect those tiny changes and put them into individual commits, and it understands what you mean. It's so good. It's one of the most fantastic features, I think.
That is indeed an amazing feature. And I think every developer in the world has been guilty of doing that at least once, like doing too many things on one commit and being like, oops, this message would have to explain a lot of things.
Exactly. So, and here we go. It already finished, and it had a pretty good commit message. Feat, implement iOS MVP with SwiftUI, Firestore, and anonymous auth. The only negative thing I'll have to say, but this is on me, it did commit this on main. It should have gone into a feature branch.
Ouch, yeah.
Well, but actually, I'm sorry. This should have been on a feature branch. Can you please put this on a feature branch? So let's see. It's done magical things for me, where it had to go into the Git history and rewrite history for me, and cherry pick stuff. So, and all of that, I wouldn't be able to do that myself because I am such a noob with Git. I always use a visual tool to help me do that. But here you can just say what you want, and it does it. So it did create a new branch, I think. I saw that for a moment there. It even pushed. What?
Did it not have, oh, there was an error? No.
Let's see. Yeah. So.
Oh, there you go. iOS MVP. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Nice. Finally, create a PR for me. And in the background, Xcode is unhappy. Close. Close. And stop tasks. Whatever. So I created a feature branch, cleaned up main, switched back to the feature branch, created a pull request, and the pull request is now up here. And
nice.
We can have somebody review that and merge it into main, and people can check it out and try it themselves. Oh, which reminds me.
Apparently, this is going to be me, so I'm somebody.
Yeah, so, oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
We accidentally committed our Google service info.plist file. Can you please remove that?
Good catch.
So, I mean, I should probably just shut down that project.
Yeah. I have been waiting 1.5 hours to say that. So we did code. We just did a commit. We didn't deploy to production, but we did push the code somewhere people can see. So do you think next month we can repeat?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's up to you to decide if we continue working on the iOS version or if we implement the same thing for Android.
Yeah, this can go both ways. We either finish iOS and change to Android, or like try to walk hand in hand as we start adding more features into it.
All right, cool. So people on the stream, if you like what we did today, you know what you should do. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, and come back next time we go live on the channel to wipe code on this application and get it to production.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.